Hi, this is Al Adamson, founder and executive director of the Talent Strategy Institute. Thank you for joining us today. Super excited to be with Rob Sentz, Chief Innovation Officer at MZ and also the founder of Find Your Calling. Rob, you there?
Yes, I am.
Hey, Rob, thanks for being on today. Super excited to listen to what you have to share, and we have a great group dialed in. So just want to give everyone an orientation about who you are and what Find Your Calling is all about. So how'd you start? Where did this come from?
Yeah, thank you. So this really came from, well, I'll back up and go about, 5, 10 years ago. At our core, MZ is a company that's dedicated to the curation and provision of labor market information for a wide variety of needs. That data helps people make programmatic decisions about educational programs that should be offered in the context of regions. More recently, we've seen the data we offer help employers make better talent acquisition decisions. And when we talk about the data is information that we gather from disparate federal and state sources that tell us about the performance of industries and occupations and demographics. And so that's really what we've been doing as a company. MZ stands for Economic Modeling Specialists, and we've been helping people understand the realities of the labor market, the workforce, the economy in different regions throughout the nation. We've been doing that for the better part of 16 years now, and what happened in the year 2010, really through 2008, 2009, was when the recession happened, we saw this huge shift in the interest in data. So where you might have public sector entities like workforce development professionals and post-secondary education planners sort of using data to make programmatic decisions for the previous decade, you saw a great need from job seekers and students to understand data better so they could make better enrollment decisions in school. So we started to work with that, provide data to parents, to students at the college level so they could enroll in the right program so they could get into a career they wanted. Over the past 3 years, we've been brought into a number of conversations in places everywhere from like the White House all the way down to local high schools in order to provide data to help even younger people, high school students and maybe even younger, make better education decisions based on careers they want to pursue. So that's how we've gotten here. And so Find Your Calling is a free site that we've designed using data to help young people make better decisions in their future.
Super cool, and as I've long said in our conversations, wish I had this when I was younger. I'm super thankful that our kids have exposure to this. So, with that, what do you have to share today?
Yeah, so I'll kind of do a little bit of a setup here, and it's just more of the narrative about how we've gotten here and how we're looking at the problem, and then yeah, I'd love to answer questions and talk about it. So one of the first things is that, here in America, it's increasingly true that if you want a good career, you have to go to college. You want to be employable, you need some sort of degree. And when I say a degree, education is becoming unbundled. So a degree could be, a certificate in something. It could be a particular training course that you went through. It could be online activities. It still is, in many cases, some sort of 4-year degree or a 2-year degree. And we all know that. We hear it all the time. We tell pretty much every high school student in the country, if you want to be successful, you need to go to school. We've all heard that, and we continue to tell our kids that. And it really has shaped behavior. I think this is a very interesting graph here. This comes from UCLA, the Higher Education Research Institute. And essentially, what it's telling us, if you look at that top blue line, 88% of incoming freshmen are in college because they want to be successful in a career. And this is a noticeably larger share than in the mid-2000s. The recession era changed behavior with regard to post-secondary in dramatic ways. And we all know that education isn't necessarily job training. right? But we tell high school students and even younger, if you want to be successful, you need to get a degree. But here's the question, right? Here's this, here's our high school student standing on the hill looking at the economy, looking at the big city and going, what am I going to do? The issue is what degree, what career. It's not a matter of whether you study and learn, it's what you study and learn right now, right? I think it's dangerous just to say, I'm going to go away to college and then I'm going to be okay. That's not true. You need to be intentional when you go and be learning the right sorts of things. So,
Rob, if
yeah,
I can
go ahead.
pause you there, because
Yeah,
historically, correct me if I'm wrong, it was just, go to college and you'll figure
right.
it out. And college was a place of discovery. And so what I'm hearing as well is still a place of discovery. There
Mhm.
needs to be a greater sense of intention given the cost of college, the opportunity
Absolutely.
cost in terms of time and so forth. Is that fair?
Absolutely. Right on. Yeah, and I wouldn't dissuade anybody from going to school, but it's a huge economic decision that you are making and a huge amount of money. And so I think people need to be aware of the economics of the sort of things they're learning, right? And
Absolutely.
so what at MZ we have oceans of data related to all the occupation information, all the education information, and after all these discussions, even at the White House, we visited there twice, all the way down to local high school students. We've been shaping this data specifically to help young people with a simple goal, and the simple goal is it's funny how we have culturally become consumers of almost everything, but it's funny how we haven't been good consumers of education. Like we can consume anything. Like we can have data on the value of consumption almost anything, but we don't really have that on data. And when I think about it, I do think of it like this. So decisions, right? Every single one of us makes literally hundreds, maybe even thousands of decisions per day. Something like this. What should I wear? You know, where should I eat? What time do I need to be at the airport? Where is the airport? Now think about how you make many of those decisions, and think about what's happened culturally in the past dozen years. The advent of technology, and particularly those addictive phones we all have. I mean, half of us are probably actually on our phone right now. The time it takes for many of us to make those types of decisions has been diminished almost nothing. If you think about um, what you want to wear, that type of thing. You might have used to wake up in the morning and watch the news, and then you'd have to kind of sit there for a few minutes until they get to the weather forecast, and then you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to wear a sweater today. If it's like a restaurant, you might have needed to, like, you're going to go on a business trip. You might need to call somebody from the town or consult a local travel guide. For the airport, you would maybe need to like go buy a map, or even worse, stop at a gas station and ask somebody, right? But all those decisions have been reduced to almost nothing, you know.
Right.
And you just pull out your phone, and then instantly I know what restaurant to go to. I'm going to wear a sweater because it's going to be cool. I know how to get to the airport. I don't even need to think about it. Now, I have found it really odd culturally that in this information-dominated era we live in, we still don't really have a clear way to help young people make better decisions related to something as critical as their future work, as their future career. So that's kind of where I'm at with all this, and that's really what's inspired this whole conversation. And when we talk about these things from an employer standpoint, we often hear this idea of the skills gap. Right? We hear that all the time. There's a skills gap. Not enough people. We can't hire people. The education system's not doing it. The recruiting's very difficult. But I do think of this as an information gap. It's not like we don't have skilled people entering the workforce. It's not like we don't have millions and millions of people trying to find jobs, right? The issue is they don't lack the information to actually even go there. They don't even know that a lot of these opportunities exist. So, think of it like this. Culturally, we assume, hey, I'll just figure it out when I go to college, but that's really backwards. We should question that type of thing more. In the olden days, I think people could get away with it, but what we found through the recession, and as there has been such a proliferation of highly skilled, highly technical, highly specific occupations to the tune of 150 million jobs in the United States that are very specific. Yeah, why in the world would anybody actually ever figure out what it means to be some advanced web developer who knows this really specific coding language? Like, they don't, that
Right.
information is not available readily. And so I think what we see, and so when we look at things like this, look at national debt and unemployment rates. In 2014, the average student loan was $33,000. Over 70% of our nation's college grads leave college with loans. And not only that, about 8.5% of recent college grads are unemployed, and another 17% are underemployed, which makes getting rid of debt super difficult. So I think this is, we tell people to go to school, and then that's what they're doing. They're going to school. They're getting debt, and then they get out of school, and 17% are actually underemployed. They're not actually working in areas related to the money they spend. And I saw another survey the other day where a huge number of high school guidance counselors now, personally, they're not actually actively telling kids not to go to school, but they ask them personally, do you think as many people should be going to college as are? And they actually said no. Personally, I don't
Mm.
think that many people should be going to school. And it's because of this. So much debt
Yeah.
and so much underemployment. And so again, it's like, I don't think school is the problem. I think people don't know what they're doing. You know? And the way I would look at it is kind of this. George Gilder, really interesting writer, economist, as he observed the recession and sort of what happened with the banking meltdown, this is a great piece of information here. The great economic crisis of our day, a crisis of theory and practice, is a crisis of information. He was kind of looking at all the economic breakdown and meltdown we were going through was because people were making awful decisions about things, and they lacked data. They lacked information to make good ones. So my point here, from a young person perspective, is when we lack good information, we make poor decisions. So information transfer really is the key economic issue of our day. And if you think about workforce and talent type issues, that is tantamount. We've got to get that stuff figured out. And so there's tons of anxiety right now. Parents are worried about what their kids are going to do. Young people tend to bounce around a ton when they first enter the job market, and that bounce usually leads them back to their parents, or less than ideal jobs, and also in their parents' basement because they have so much debt. And so I think that's the setup. That is the sort of the landscape that we're dealing with. And so what we've been doing is trying to shape this data, and we've realized as we're economists, we're people who have data. That's kind of like putting ice cubes down someone's back. Hey, young person, let's get into economics. So what we've been doing is trying to create a consumer brand that basically takes all this power. Go back to that George Gilder quote. It takes all the power and puts it into parents and students' hands so they can become those consumers, much like they are consumers of restaurants and travel and all sorts of things, consumers of their careers. Give them the power to make better choices. And then so really ultimately who's it's for, I've already touched on this, but our first target really is those high school students, and in many ways people want us to do it younger, which we can, but really thinking about those high school students. And then we think a lot about the recent college grads, recent high school grads who still might not have enrolled in something, are potentially more career oriented and need to find something quickly, and then the parents who have a dire need to help their young folks at home. And one of the real common adages that we come across is, my son or daughter wants to do X. Maybe my career, I've been an accountant, or a bookkeeper or something like that for years, and they really want to be they want to work in logistics or something like that. I have no idea what that is. I have no background in that. I don't know what to tell them. I don't know what the jobs look like. This allows a parent to kind of come alongside of their child with data and encourage them and actually have things, well, here's school for you, and actually walk through how it works. So how does it actually work? What are we actually doing? The first thing we do is we do just a simple assessment where an assessment allows us to clear out, there's so much data, right? So it allows us to target that young person on the right data. The next thing we do is we really talk about relevant job families. Job families are these high-level categories that represent a lot of careers. So for instance, manufacturing or information technology or healthcare. These are high-level categories that we find that young people tend to recognize throughout their, high school life. They know what these things are. From there, we then show them detailed career information about the pay of specific opportunities, the growth, the description, the employers, which was really cool. We actually, when we start to show parents and students the fact that you can make money, but then, oh, by the way, like Amazon does this, they're like, oh, I didn't know they did that. And then ultimately the education, and then that leads us to the colleges and universities. So what I'll do is actually toggle over and show a little bit about how it works. Okay, so here's the site. It's called Find Your Calling. Just very simple. We have a little video here that tells the story. It's kind of fun. We had an animator kind of go through that for us. And it's just a matter of you get started, and we're still working on things. We're still testing and figuring things out, but we found that people really like this. So 6 simple questions to start. The first question is all about like planning and organization. And so in this case, we would encourage a young person to think about, when you were little, did you like to plan parties? Did you like it? Did you like organizing your room? Okay, well, if you like that kind of thing, let's slide this further to the right. I'd like to spend all my time or a lot of my time doing this type of work. If you weren't so big on that, you might leave it over here more towards the left. Second is about exploring and figuring things out. This is kind of like your engineering thing. Did you always like to, when your dad was, out in the garage, you were always like, Dad, how's the engine work? How's that work? If you like that a lot, slide it over here. Middle, I did that a little bit, or I wasn't really into that. Leave it over here. So in each case, here we go, working with your hands. Like this is like putting that bookshelf together from the store. This is like, persuading, convincing. It's like, hey, did you convince your mom all the time to get that dog when you were little? This is helping, coaching, things like that, teaching. Were you the sort of person on the playground when you saw that new kid, you were there helping them out, figuring the ropes out and all that? And then this is the creativity. Did you always find yourself doodling? Do you love to write? Do you love to paint? Things like that. So based on how they answer it, we also then ask them, do you want to get into the labor market quickly? Are you thinking about an associate's degree or less? Or are you willing to make more of an education investment? If they are, they click there. And then what we do is show them some results. This tells me that I tend to be a creator and a persuader. So these are my top 2 interest areas. And an interest area, it doesn't mean I necessarily have skills in that yet. It doesn't mean I have a resume or anything like that. It means that these are areas of work that would tend to energize me. And this is, for me, this is very true. I like the creative stuff, and I like the persuasive aspect of talking to people, telling stories, and helping, doing, etc. And then, for instance, organizing and thinking type activities are probably a little less, energize me less than the top ones. So I might stay away from those. And for that reason, and this has been interesting as we've shown this to parents, is this tells me that for me, human services, art and design, business management, marketing, sales are my highest matches. So what it allows me to do is kind of stay away from things like finance and law. And for instance, me, STEM, we tend to push everybody towards STEM, but it's telling me that STEM work might not be my best match. But up here, these would probably energize me. So for instance, let's look at something in art and design. Like, okay, that's kind of interesting. And let's maybe look in California. I want to look at some career matches in California. And so we click on that. So we saw that category, and now these are all really good matches for my interest area. The thing that's interesting about them is I probably, as a young person, have no idea what most of these are. I probably don't know what a technical writer is. I might know what a producer is because I like films and things. There's a director. I probably don't know what a program director is. I probably don't know what a talent director is. But these are all paying pretty well. They all have some interesting growth, and they all kind of match up with my interests. And so from right here, immediately have a whole bunch of data, a whole bunch of information that I share with my teacher. I might want to share this with my mom and dad, or mom and dad might want to sit down and say, hey, here's some really cool things. And I'm going to just click on one of these. I'll click on technical writer. And what we do here is now we're starting to unwrap all this data that we have that might be kind of dense and difficult. And what we do here is we say there's about 10,000 technical writers in California. On average, they make about $80,000 a year. And they're growing. They're growing about 3%. You might hear them called things like this in different places. And starting out, you'll probably make about $57,000 a year. But over the course of a working life, you might be making about 110. We have a description of what they do, and then this has been very interesting, is we actually have some companies. So Oracle, for instance, is hiring people who are technical writers. And it kind of makes sense. Companies need people who can write. They have products. They have people who can write all sorts of things about products, maybe even in contracts. So that's always really resonating with people. And now what we can do is toggle over and start to look at the schools. Before we do that, we give them a glimpse of, and this is interesting here, about 35% of the people who work as technical writers in California have an associate's, and then 36% have a bachelor's. So in this case, you actually might be able to do it with an associate's or bachelor's. So that's interesting information. It's got a split there. You actually do have some people who haven't even finished a degree working as technical writers. These are some of the top programs. So professional, technical, and business scientific writing looks like the top program you might want to think about if you want to do it. And then what we do is we present the education providers. So Point Loma and San Francisco State University actually graduate the most people out of those programs. If we want to look over at the community colleges, De Anza and American River have the most graduates. And if we click on those, it just tells us things like here's the tuition, here's how many people are currently enrolled. And then what we're working on doing is actually helping young people connect to those schools. So that's the basic story. It's hopefully, as I just showed you, I was able to go through the site pretty quickly. And that's what it's all about, putting data in someone's hands so they can have it and then go out into the market and have those conversations about what they're interested in and what they need to do to get there.
That's absolutely super cool. A question that we've talked about in the past,
yeah,
that's related to a question that came in, is there a more thorough assessment? I know there's those 6 questions that you started off with. Is there an opportunity to go deeper to achieve a higher level of self-awareness to focus on the careers that are most relevant?
That's a great question. And that comes up quite a bit. People really appreciate, as we've worked with some high school guidance counselors and people, they really appreciate the 6 questions, but what often happens once they get through the 6 questions is they do ask, is there something deeper? So we are working on a deeper, richer, more like 200 question assessment that they would be able to save and have as part of their profile. And we just haven't added that yet, but there are some really good ones that integrate perfectly with this data that we will look to add over the next year.
Outstanding. Now, and this, if I heard you correctly, this is available now for free. Is that
yes. Mm-hmm.
At findyourcalling.com. Okay.
Yeah.
And in terms of what's your plan for the future insofar as how are you marketing to parents? Are you marketing to high school students themselves? I mean, how is this going to get traction?
Yeah. So that's a great question. There's really kind of 3 things that we're working on. So MZ's parent is Career Builder, and Cribbler's CEO has really seen this as a big need in the market. A lot of people use Cribbler to find jobs and things like that, but increasingly over time, a lot of those people have gotten older, and they might be mid-career or even later, and now they have kids that are kind of facing the same economic dilemma. Um, Cribbler wants to start to share this with their audience, which is quite large. They have millions and millions of people in their network that they can share this with. So that would be one. The second would be to work with um, a lot of high school-based groups. So over the years, our primary focus as a company has tended to be with education, and so we've worked with a number of high school groups, and we want to provide this to them so they can take it out and help the people they serve with it. So that'd be the second. And then the third is we're just going to be starting to work at the local level with different organizations, workforce boards, community colleges. We'll be doing some of our own promotions across the nation to get it out there. For instance, it's kind of interesting, we're doing a PGA event in California. It's called the Cribbler Classic, which used to be the Bob Hope Classic. But we were going to take Find Your Calling as part of that into the local community and help all the high school students look at the data. So things like that, a lot of community outreach, a lot of grassroots efforts via different organizations like that.
Got it. So if there's a local parent organization, they can obviously promote it within their group, and so there's nothing holding back.
It's all free. Yeah, it's all out there. Mm-hmm. And we're building some training materials too. It's one of the things, like we're building training materials that we'll put on the website. So if somebody is working in a high school situation and they want to download training materials and present it, we would make that all available too, just so they can be comfortable with the data and things like that.
Got it. And do you see this being a one-off event that a high school student would go through, or would they come back repeatedly? Is there a way for them to kind of log their progress or changes in interest that they might have, or is that just something on the drawing board right now?
So in the first quarter, we're going to release profiles. So we would allow someone to save all the data and create a profile. And really what we've seen as we've done our testing, and this is still very much a baby, so we're using it for testing, but what we found is when somebody finds something they're interested in, so for instance, marketing manager here, like, whoa, there are 40,000 in California and they make 123, in the midpoint, that's really good. What we found young people or parents need to do is save this information and then take it out and share it. Maybe they go visit with a college and they're like, hey, can you tell us more about this? Maybe they even want to go visit a company or two. We see more and more companies have sort of youth outreach that they're doing. They're getting involved with different education initiatives. So it's all about making the connection between education and employers. And we want to allow people to save this, make it part of their profile, and share it with other people. Now that'll be the first quarter of next year.
Yeah, got it. Outstanding. Well, super cool. Any final comments you have to share with the group?
Yeah. So one thing, and I've presented on this a number of times now, and one of the things that always happens whenever I talk about this is employers have really expressed a lot of interest and really gravitated towards certain elements of this. And I think it's because what we're finding right now is a lot of employers are developing internal missions related to education. When I say that, again, with the recession, what it did is it forced people to become more strategic about how they thought about talent. And just recruiting out of college or just putting job postings up often isn't enough right now. And so we're seeing more companies, and this is, when I started talking about this, it wasn't something I anticipated. It's funny, every time you put out a technology, the way people use it and look at it is always a little bit different than you initially thought. And so we've started to put this data out, and we've found that employers have said, I would love to get involved with things like this. And really what's materialized is employers, for instance, if you are hiring a lot of marketing managers, or that's a critical need, we want to allow employers to come into the site and sponsor content that helps young people understand things more deeply and richly. And I think that's interesting because data, for instance, right here is sort of cold and two-dimensional. There's 40,000. But what employers can tell us is this is what a day in the life of a marketing manager at our company looks like. This is the actual schools we recommend. These are the actual skills that are important to us. These are things you should be thinking about. And so as students create those profiles, we can also allow them to learn more about the companies that are out there doing this work, which they often don't know. So I think that'll be, so I said we're going to add profiles in the first quarter. We're also going to add in the ability for employers to sponsor occupations that they're very passionate about in the site. Another way to
and will those employers be able to search profiles if someone makes their profile public? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's something that we're working towards is so if, let's say, some young person, sees marketing manager, he comes through, he saves it, makes it part of his profile, and he says, I'd love for, maybe we do something like there's scholarships available, I would love to do a field trip and learn more about this. I'd love to learn about the schools. That's something that we would like to allow. And it's very it's non-creepy. It's like, this is something I'm interested in. All right, here's 3 or 4 companies that you can get in touch with, or might get in touch with you because you made your profile public to them. So that's really what we would be working towards.
Interesting. So just to play that out, there could be a scenario where, okay, I've committed to be a marketing manager. I'm going to school. I'm going to graduate in 8 months. And so employers could feasibly say, okay, this person's going to be available for hire. He or she is doing well. And now I can start recruiting him or her and hopefully have a match. So now I can be confident that I'm going to have to fill that job at a future point in time. Is that a fair scenario?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Really cool. Really cool.
And we would
all right, sir.
Yeah.
No, you go ahead.
And I could give an example. We would flow, so where it says marketing manager, we would actually flow their content straight into the page. And one thing is we found as we've tested is video really resonates. Obviously, not surprising, right? But what we're working towards is the creation of little videos that can be sponsored by these companies that really break down the day in the life of a marketing manager, it's kind of like a virtual field trip. Come into our company, see what their workspace looks like, meet an actual person, hear it from their own mouth, what they recommend that you should be thinking about. You really need to focus on, these courses when you're in high school. And if you really love this type of work, this is your thing. And here's where I went to school, and all those sorts of things. This is all about creating that awareness at a younger age.
Right. Well, I'll say it again. It seems like for the 8th time, it's outstanding work, super cool, and I'm glad you've made the effort to bring this together. I mean, it's immensely valuable, and wish you the very best. So I imagine if people want to learn more, they just go to the findyourcalling.com site. Is that correct?
Yeah, they do. And if people have questions or want to get engaged, if people want to share it in their local community, or if there's people who are kind of like, that sponsors thing sounds cool, or anything, I'm happy to follow up, answer questions. Really, any way I can help. My goal right now is just to get it out there and help people engage with it and learn, make it better all the time.
Outstanding. Well, Rob, thank you again for joining us today, and wish you the very best, and thank you all for joining, and happy holidays.
All right, thank you.